They should get, I'm saddened to hear that report. If that's true, most of the reporting I've seen on these detention centers are that people are getting education and health care. So I, of course...
Well, look,
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Voter's Viewpoint. We've got a moment here from a live panel with Abby Phillip that quickly goes off track during a discussion on immigration and detention policy. Instead of a clear debate, you start seeing weak arguments and deflection, and then one reaction cuts through it all. A single laugh that exposes how fragile some of these talking points really are under pressure. This is what happens when political loyalty replaces facts. The argument does not hold, and it falls apart in real time. If you want more clear breakdowns like this, hit like and subscribe. It helps push this analysis further. Now let's get into it.
It's one thing for me to acknowledge something, and there's something else to sit here and act like there's nothing that needs to be corrected. This lovely gentleman sat right here and tried to erase it, literally sitting next to me, literally. So even doing the comparison, saying, would you rather go to China or not go to China? Are you a veteran? So that means you never raised the pause means no. So that means he never raised his hand to say, I'm willing to die for this country. Let's not talk about just the Dow. Not only was I willing to die for this country, both of my grandparents were.
Thank you for your service.
That's right. Thank me for my service. So how dare he sit here and ask me. So how dare he sit here and ask me would I rather be in China when I was willing to die for the country that is locking up the people that we're talking about. There are more black men enslaved than those who were enslaved in 1850 in the prison system right now in 1850 that did not actually get the due process that you guys are talking about, that actually had to take plea bargains because they could not afford adequate law attorneys, which is why I'm in law school, by the way, right now. Shout out to FAMU. So to sit here and ask me, what country do I live in? It's called America. You can't point nothing out.
I do. I want to say this. If you were on the Abby Phillip show Chinese version, you wouldn't be here.
But I'm not the Chinese version. I'm here at the American version.
All right.
The black. I know, and I'm saying it, and I'm saying it, and I'm enjoying it, and I fought for mine and yours. So thank me for my service.
All right, my friends, listen.
Thank me for my service. I'm not disparaging. I just want you to thank me.
We're going to bring this to a close. I mean, I do think it is worth acknowledging that you don't have to prefer China to say that I want to be able to, in this country, both live in the country and critique it at the same time.
These freedoms
sure.
And be able,
I know. I think that she's actually saying the same thing, that she's expressing her right to criticize, to acknowledge the past and how bad or how good it was. So I don't know that you guys are all that. I don't know that you guys are all that far.
But nobody disparages democracy. And I answered your question, and you still didn't deal with the issue at hand.
Hey, listen, I didn't serve.
Last week, she said medical staff initially refused to see her after she began hemorrhaging profusely, soaking through 6 sanitary pads in an hour. Eventually, she was taken to a hospital. And last summer, a 32-year-old man died at the Florence Center after being detained at a facility for roughly 3 weeks. Now, that facility is being run by a company called Core Civic, and they have a statement saying, nothing matters more to Core Civic than the health and safety of the people in our care. He says the facilities routinely pass government inspections, and the reports of substandard care are simply not reflective of the hard work their people do. DHS simply says in a statement, it is a choice to be detained, and people can simply self-deport. But I just ask, are we still good with holding children, some as young as 2 months old, for indefinite amounts of time in any kind of facility that is basically a jail?
Look, I don't like hearing those stories. I want everyone to be safe and get the health care and what they need. I think it is a reminder, though, that we frankly don't have the resources to provide health care for the millions of illegal people who came in here. And on the other point of people sort of complaining about these detention centers, just in general. It's interesting. I mean, for years, the media ignored these stories about people who were complaining, whether it was in Texas on a border state or Springfield, Ohio, of immigrants who were flooding their towns and they didn't have resources at all.
But you're being asked about children in a detention center, not about immigrants taking health care.
And now
that was covered.
It was covered. It was ridiculed. People who.
It was definitely covered.
People who were trying to erect the border walls
should we be keeping children in detention facilities without the proper health care?
That's the question. I would like. My understanding is children are getting health care there. I think they should get. I'm saddened to hear that report. If that's true, most of the reporting I've seen on these detention centers are that people are getting education and health care. So I, of course.
Well, look, I mean, both things can be true at the same time. It is.
We're getting education.
I would blame these parents, though, for putting their children in this position.
Hold on. Look, there are at least some cases. There's one case where a family had, during the Biden administration, had come through the CBP-1 app. They had been inspected. They had gone through the application. They were told they could come into the country, and now they are being detained with their young child in a detention facility. Now, you can disagree with the actions of the Biden administration, but what is the point of punishing children for their parents doing something that was the illegal process at the time and putting them in, again, regardless of how many nurses they have or books they have in these facilities, these are jails.
Abby, when you're dealing with millions of people, there's always going to be horrific stories like this. That's not going to stop. I think a bigger issue
but you
is
realize that
is there a middle ground
is an issue here, right?
Listen to this. I mean, I talked to a farmer from Iowa last week while I was in Florida, and he told me that if we threw out all of the people that work on his farms, we wouldn't eat anymore. And so what he's asking for is, say, wait a second, if this person came into the country, is supporting a family, never broke a law, is there some kind of middle ground to help him get his papers as a citizen, perhaps, while he works and feeds America? That was his question. I said,
it's a good question, but Trump promised mass deportation.
Remember, if you broke a law, if you actually are found in, I don't know, ICE or some other law enforcement entity, and you clearly came here illegally and you broke a law, I'm sorry.
All right, Kevin, a quick last word.
Oh, wow.
Which I'm not sure.
My last word is, you're all nuts. Like, that's just...
Oh, my God.
Thank you, Kevin.
Guys,
am I in on that? Okay.
Look, we got to keep it together here, okay?
We are.
Honestly. I mean, there's a way to talk about these things. If you don't have anything to say, just say that, and I won't come to you next time.
You don't have basic
next for us, Kevin. Everyone, thank you for being here.
That was a stretch. It was
next.
insane.
Excuse me.
What stands out here is not just the tension, it is the collapse of an argument under pressure. Start with the core exchange. The discussion was about detention conditions, healthcare access, and the treatment of migrants, including children. These are policy questions. They require evidence, clarity, and accountability. Instead, what you saw was a shift away from facts toward general claims that could not hold when challenged. Take the key moment. A claim is made that detention centers are providing education and healthcare based on most of the reporting seen. That is not evidence. That is a vague assertion, and the reaction that follows the laughter lands because it exposes the gap between the claim and the documented concerns that have been raised publicly. This is where the analysis matters. There have been repeated reports from courts and oversight bodies about conditions in immigration detention. A federal judge requiring proper medical care, food, and legal access is not speculation. It is a legal intervention. That alone tells you there were failures serious enough to require enforcement. So when broad claims are made that everything is functioning properly, without addressing those rulings, the argument weakens immediately. Now look at the framing that followed. The idea that detention is simply a choice because individuals can leave. That argument ignores legal reality. Many detainees are in active legal proceedings. Leaving can mean abandoning asylum claims or legal protections. That is not a free choice in any meaningful sense. This is where Democratic-lined policy arguments tend to focus more precisely. The issue is not whether immigration laws exist. The issue is how those laws are enforced and whether they meet basic standards of due process and human dignity. And that is where the contrast becomes clear. On one side, you have arguments rooted in enforcement. First, often framed around scale numbers and resource strain. On the other side, you have arguments focused on rights, legal process, and the treatment of vulnerable groups, especially children. Those are not the same priorities. Now bring in the broader dynamic of the panel. When the conversation shifts from policy to emotion, from evidence to defensiveness, you lose structure. That is what happened when the exchange escalated and eventually broke down completely. By the time the closing moment arrives, with Kevin O'Leary dismissing the panel as all nuts, there is no argument left. There is only frustration. That moment is important. It shows what happens when someone cannot defend a position under scrutiny. It replaces argument with insult. It signals the end of substantive engagement. And that is not a one-off. It reflects a broader pattern in political discourse. When complex policy issues are reduced to slogans or talking points, they can sound convincing in isolation. But when they are tested in real debate, especially with facts on the table, they often fail to hold. This is why moments like the one you saw travel so widely. They are not just about who won a debate, they are about exposing the difference between evidence-based argument and narrative-driven positioning. Now step back and look at the stakes. Immigration policy is not abstract. It affects real people. Families navigating legal systems, children in detention environments, workers contributing to local economies. Even within the clip, that tension is acknowledged. A farmer raising concerns about labor needs, questions about children in detention, and the legal contradictions in policy enforcement. These are real issues. They require serious solutions. That is where democratic policy framing becomes clearer. Expand legal pathways. Protect due process rights. Ensure humane conditions in detention. Address labor needs through structured immigration reform. These are policy debates grounded in governance, not just rhetoric. And that is the difference. Because when the conversation stays grounded in facts, you can move toward solutions. When it drifts into unsupported claims and emotional deflection, it breaks down, just like you saw here. So as you watch clips like this, focus on what holds up, who provides evidence, who answers the question directly, who shifts when challenged. That is how you separate signal from noise. If this breakdown helped you see what was really going on beneath the surface, hit the like button and subscribe to The Voter's Viewpoint. It helps keep clear, fact-based analysis in front of more people. Drop your thoughts in the comments as well. What stood out to you in that exchange? Stay informed, stay sharp, and I'll see you in the next one.